Hi, everybody. Today is August 11th, and you are watching or attending the Kubernetes SIG Testing bi-weekly meeting. I am your host, Aaron Drinkenberger, and I am adhering to the, this meeting is being publicly recorded and will be posted to YouTube later, so you can all watch yourselves adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct that we follow at these meetings by being your very best selves and not being jerks. On today's agenda, I'm not entirely sure about the first two items. We've got a couple of demos to show, and then I wanted to have a follow-up about sort of the Kubernetes CI policy discussion we had last week. So first up, is Howard Zhang here, or is anybody here able to speak to having the Proud Pod utility images on ARM?
I was building some a while back for, or the Proud images themselves, maybe not the pod utility, but for Raspberry Pi.
Okay, this was something we didn't have the opportunity to get to last meeting, and I think it was handled on Slack offline, but if not, we can come back to this. They happen to show up to the meeting today. Next, there was an entry here. I don't know who this is from, about Triage Party and the Kubernetes PR dashboard. Does anybody here? Did anybody put that on the agenda here?
I would assume that was great.
Yeah, that was me. We don't have to cover if we have other things, but it was just I had talked to Triage Party and Ben just about maybe making a drop-in replacement for the PR dashboard since Kubernetes getting older and older and less used.
That would be really cool. I know Arnaud has been involved in setting up a Triage Party instance for the release team. Arnaud and George, do either of you have anything to say about how Triage Party is going for y'all right now?
I can also describe that.
Oh, Lori, please.
Yeah. So I'd spoken to Thomas last night. So I basically did an audit of what the Triage Party setup for Minikube and Scaffold are monitoring and how it's displaying the information. And it was basically, you can set different time limits for what you want to watch and PRs, comments, etc. So it actually helps you organize the bucket of work overall into those categories so that you can, take action on PRs, issues, etc. And then you can also have tabs for specific types of issues. So if there are like tools for you that you want to just monitor like the issues on a specific tool, you could actually probably set up a tab to do that. For release team, so that work is basically to figure out how we can prioritize the work, not just in terms of urgency, but we're also looking about impact. So like, what is the highest value work that we could possibly do? And so that's a discussion that we have to have, but essentially we want to see if we can use Triage Party to have a single source of truth to bring all of the different project boards together. The tabs enable you to do that. So you can watch different themes in one place. So we haven't used it yet in meetings because we have a lot of things in the backlog to sort through. But once that is in a reasonable place, I'm basically drafting a roadmap for how we would use Triage Party, and then what are the types of labels that we would need to use it as best as we can, including those impact labels.
So maybe Grant knows more about this, but the question I have is whether it would be possible to tailor that dashboard to an individual. So to speak briefly to what Kubernetes PR dashboard does right now, I can go to kubernetes.arcades.io/PR. I could hold myself accountable here and do this live, I guess. And it'll show me like what PRs are on deck for me to review. So if I go to kubernetes.arcades.io/PR/spifxp, I have apparently 18 pull requests that need my attention. And it does this by like a little bit of a state machine that mostly like looks at PRs and the labels that are applied to them, and then like who has most recently commented on it. So um, I can get like, but the thing is, it's personalized to me. So this isn't me looking at SIG Testing's review queue. This is looking at like my individual PR workload, and this seems easier for me to manage than GitHub's. So it's unclear to me whether Triage Party supports that kind of workflow. And I don't know, like maybe how many people use this. I kind of live or die by this this PR dashboard for what it's worth, which is one of the reasons I think Grant's been looking at it, because the rest of Kubernetes we don't touch anymore, and so I guess it's kind of trying to figure out if we want to rewrite this or if we can use Triage Party instead.
Yeah, I can see this being useful for the release team as well. So
I synced up with Thomas about this, and I created an issue, and he said they were planning to try to do something user-centric, and I was hoping to get to that work, so I was going to put a PR up against Triage Party to add OAuth with GitHub and have this like user-centric dashboard. And then I was also talking to him on Ben's recommendation about multi-tenancy, so we don't have to have multiple Triage Party instances per team. We could have like a single instance with multi-repo and multi-tenancy or tenants. So it'd just be easier to have everything in one place and be able to see like SIG release, SIG testing, like your Triage Party within the same instance.
I don't know if also like the priority label would be helpful, because then you can also kind of organize your workload based on what's most urgent.
That definitely, that could be useful. Okay, sounds like that would, augmenting Triage Party sounds like a really neat idea and maybe a useful way for us to align our efforts. Next up on the agenda, we had Shane present a design doc to us a little while back about sort of a secret rotation thing he's been working on to help us manage prow secrets. And Shane wanted to present a demo today. Shane, are you available? Let's see.
Yeah.
I need to make you co-host so you can share your screen. Give me just a moment.
Okay.
Okay. Take it away, Shane.
Okay.
Yeah, we can see your slides.
Okay. So I'll get started. Hello, everyone. I'm Shane, and today I'm going to talk about my project integrating Kubernetes Secret with the Google Cloud Secret Manager. And I'm going to include a live demo in this presentation, so I'm just going to start it right now because it's going to take some time for it to run. Okay. So let's start with the background. We utilize Kubernetes to facilitate the CI process. And within these processes, sensitive data will be needed and stored as Kubernetes secrets, and then consumed by pods whoever need them. So for example, we store GCP service account keys as Kubernetes secrets, and they can be used to authorize access to other Google Cloud services, such as writing to GCS buckets or triggering Google Cloud build jobs. So These secrets need to be first securely managed and also be rotated. And what we propose here is we incorporate the Google Cloud Secret Manager and has it work as an independent secret managing platform that has a separate lifecycle from any given Kubernetes cluster. So in the case that a cluster dies for any reason, these secrets can still be restored. And also, in the case that the secret got stolen at any point, it will be invalidated after a while if the secret is being rotated. Okay, so this is the basic architecture of the project. It is an integration of the Google Cloud Secret Manager and Kubernetes secret. So after being provisioned, a secret will be managed by the secret manager, and then a secret rotator will be responsible for rotating this secret. Another secret sync controller will be continuously syncing from the secret manager to Kubernetes so that within the same cluster, a pod can hopefully consume the latest version and also the currently valid key. So suppose, for example, the currently valid service count key if it's applied on service count keys. And yeah, so the first part is the secret rotator. And what it does is it performs two actions. The first is refresh, and it happens when the last version is too old. That is, it was created too long ago. Then what it does is it tries to refresh this and create a new version of the secret. And after it did so, it will then try to invalidate all of the out-of-date version of the secrets. So one thing to note here is that we utilize the metadata of the secret manager secret to help the secret rotator. So these are the informations the rotator will need to rotate a service count key. The first two fields are the names of the project and service count for the service count key. And the last field is, it contains all of the service count key IDs for every active versions. So in this example, there's currently only one active service count key with ID of this, which is corresponding to the first version of this secret manager secret. So this is a brief example of what the secret rotator is doing on service count keys. Initially, we have one active service count key with ID of 1E9656. And after a while, it will try to refresh this key. So it creates a new key with ID of 1CD7CD. And then after a short while, it will try to invalidate, or in this case, delete the old service count key, leaving only the latest version of the secret. And this process keeps going on, and the secret will be rotated along with time. So the overlapping time period of the two versions of the secret is actually the grace period specified by the user. Okay, so the second part is the sync controller. And what it does is pretty simple. It just continuously sync from the source secret to the destination secret. And the source secret is set to be a secret manager secret, which is likely to be also rotated. And the destination secret is a desired Kubernetes secret. So for example, we're syncing on the key value pair level for a Kubernetes secret. So for example, we're syncing this secret manager secret to the value corresponding to this key of this Kubernetes secret. Okay, so let's talk about the setup for this live demo today. We use config maps in Kubernetes to specify the configurations for both the secret rotator and the secret sync controller. So in this example, the secret rotator is rotating this secret one, which is a service count key for this service count, and it has a refresh interval of 2 minutes and 30 seconds with a grace period of 1 minute. And the sync controller is continuously syncing the latest secret value in secret one into the secret value corresponding to key A of secret A in Kubernetes. So in order to verify the results for this secret rotation, we implement a mock service account key consumer within the same cluster. So what it does is it continuously watches on the mounted secret Kubernetes secret, which is the service account key in this case. And whenever an update is observed, it just makes a copy of this current service account key into another directory so that it will always have a full collection of the entire history for this secret. So it will have every version of the service account key in the other directory. And then what it does is it continuously pins all versions of the service account key and checks whether each is valid at the current time being. Okay, so let's see the results. First, we get the pod that is running the mock consumer. So it's under namespace 8. And we get the log for this. Okay, so let's see. We can start from here. So at this time point, there's only one key valid, that is the third key, key 3, and it is the only active service count key. And then after a while, the rotator will try to refresh this. So what it does is it first creates a new version of this key, which is key 4. And now the two secrets, the two keys are both active, they're coexisting, which is corresponding to the grace period of this key 3. And when the grace period for this key 3 is over, which happens within a minute here. So after the key 3 is out of its grace period, it then gets invalidated, or in this case, deleted. The key 3 will be deleted. The service count key will be deleted, and leaving only the key 4 as the currently active service count key. And the rotation just keeps going and going. So one more thing we can demonstrate here is if we stop the secret rotator now. So if the secret rotator is being terminated for whatever reason, and we can see the current status of this rotated secret. So the information needed for the rotator will be stored in the metadata for the secret, so that whenever this rotator is being restarted after it's being terminated, it can continue to rotate the secret seamlessly. So we can just try to restart the secret rotator, and what it does is because it's out of the refresh interval, so it will refresh a new service count key and come back to deactivate the old version 4 where it was terminated for any reason. Okay, so this is all for the demo, and until now we have Google Cloud Secret Manager to securely manage the secrets that will be used in Kubernetes, and we are now supporting rotation for GCP service account keys, and with secret rotation, we can mitigate the harm in the case that any secret should be stolen at any time point. And also by synchronizing from Secret Manager to Kubernetes, the pods in Kubernetes can consume these rotated secrets and hopefully get the latest version and also currently active versions of this secret. Okay, so special thanks to my host Aaron and the Kubernetes Entrot team. This is the repo for this project, and thank you all for your attention. I'm happy to take any questions and inputs.
Any questions for Shane? Cool. Thank you for your time, Shane.
Sorry, I have a quick one.
Go for it.
The slides for your presentation, are they public in somewhere?
Maybe I can just post it in chat.
Shane, I'll work with you offline to get a link posted
Okay.
to the meeting notes, and we can post a link to chat or to Slack too.
I actually spotted Aaron already had it to do in the meeting notes around that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Shane, do you mind? All right, there we go. Next up, we have Michael Kohlberg here to talk about rewriting triage in Go. I think we do. Yeah, there you are. Masked up. I like it. I need to make sure. Here, I'll make you go first as well.
I hope you can all hear me. If you can't, just let me know, and I'll take off the mask. But
you're good.
Okay. So I presented a few months ago regarding rewriting triage in Go. Because this is meant to be an in-place port, like a drop-in replacement, the best outcome is that you can't tell the difference between them, ideally. So on the left-hand side, you can see Python triage, which is currently running at its regular link, which is actually go.k8s.io/triage. And then on the right-hand side, it's the same URL, but instead of triage here, you just move it to triage go. So we should be porting this over to, instead of having this under triage go, just have it under triage by end of day today. Yeah, essentially, you can see that the number of test failures in each instance are working the same. There are a few that don't exactly agree. Like here it says 4,078, and the old one says 4,082. But overall, that's just going to be because of some time limits that are going to be different in Python versus Go. But if you scroll down a little bit, then you should see that they start to match up pretty much exactly. I think. Yeah, there you go. Right. And one thing that we did add in the new version is that the clusters for SIG now works. So in the old one, it doesn't really do anything. But if you do, for example, API machinery here, you only get clusters that are mostly related to API machinery based on the name of the test. So as you can see, most of these happen to have SIG API machinery. In addition, we did update these clusters over here, these are SIGs over here, before we had some outdated SIG lists. Yeah, that's in terms of the UI. In terms of time we're taking for the jobs, you can see here that the old ones were taking around 50 minutes to an hour, and now they're taking much less, around half an hour. If we actually want to compare them, we'll see that the average for the last, whatever this is, 20 jobs or so, is 51 minutes for the old one and 31 minutes for the new one, which is a great improvement. In addition, it's hard to compare the graphs because they're scaled differently, but you can see sort of like the high points over here, like the longest ones take 75 minutes for the old ones, more or less, and then the oldest ones, these are failed. But let's say for the normal ones, the longest it takes is 47. So even the longest jobs are taking a significantly smaller amount of time. Yeah, I think that basically concludes what I have to show. Any questions?
All right.
Are we ready to migrate?
I believe we are ready to migrate. I'm working on a PR to migrate right now, and that should be done by end of day.
Awesome.
Great. And as I understand it, this is the optimization we got from rewriting in Go. There are further optimizations we may be able to make to update the triage results even more frequently.
That is correct. There are some that are easy and should provide meaningful performance gains, and some that are a bit harder and are more tenuous in terms of how much of a performance gain they will bring. So we'll see how far we can get in the amount of time I have left in my internship.
One other really important thing that didn't come up here is that the previous implementation was minimally commented, very dense and undocumented. The README said to do. There is now a wonderful detailed README outlining everything and fairly well commented code now. Thanks for that.
There are no speed changes in the UI. I didn't touch the UI, mainly because it was supposed to be a drop-in replacement. In general, I don't think that the UI is particularly slow. Like, it's not ideal. Okay, that's not supposed to happen. Let's try this one for example. It's not particularly snappy, but I don't think it's particularly slow. If you have like any specific issues that you've been facing, you can reach out to me and I can try to figure out what's going on with that.
It doesn't happen that
We
fast.
actually had a past individual take a stab at the UI. Catherine did
July
some stuff
17th
on
or
this.
something like that.
I think short of a full-scale rewrite, you're not going to see much better, and I'm not even sure that rewriting the front end would fix it. I think you'd probably have to redesign how the front end obtains data, like do less of it in the front end or something.
Okay.
Yeah, that's possible, like pre-render the data. It already is pretty efficient. Like the person who wrote this before me did go to a lot of pains to actually make this pretty efficient. Like you can see like over here, there's not so much data, and then as you get to the bottom, it loads more. So it doesn't implement lazy loading. It is in some compressed form so that the data gets transferred more quickly. There are optimizations that were done, and I think that you'd really have to dig into it in order to optimize it further.
Well, cool. Thank you. I don't know about everybody else here, but personally, when I'm trying to like figure out if I fix the flake or not, this is the #1 tool that I use, and so it is. It was frustrating to me when I had to wait, 1 to 3 hours to see if the PR would fix anything.
This is also the way I find flakes meaningfully. Test grid is great for telling me if like a job is passing or something, but this is really useful for telling me that some specific failure mode is popping up in our jobs, especially across jobs. And having that latency meant it was difficult to know if changes that we suspected might introduce issues were introducing issues, like upgrading a container runtime or something. No, sorry, Z, the optimization is a complete rewrite of the data processing pipeline from Python to Go.
Yeah,
there shouldn't be any noticeable differences in the front end. The optimization is all going on in the back end in the pre-processing. So what happens is there's a stage where it processes everything and then uploads it to cloud storage, and then this web page pulls it from cloud storage. So any speed changes that we see would be in that first stage, nothing in the second stage.
All right. Thanks for your time, Michael.
Sure.
Okay. Next up, let's talk about Kubernetes CI policy. Lori, I feel like you've been doing a lot of organizing of stuff. Did you want to walk people through what's been set up in terms of organization?
Sure. So I don't think I can share the project board without hosting, but
Yeah,
maybe you can
maybe.
pull it up. It's fine if you want to just
All right.
do that. That'll be easier.
Give me a moment.
Sure.
Okay, meeting notes, project board. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay.
So I think going from right to left would be easier because I'm going to ask the group if you need these approved and in review columns. It seems like they just jump to close, so maybe we just delete those.
That sounds fine to me. I mean, I think for some of the work that we're going through right now, it has a pretty fixed workflow. There may be other things where there are pull requests that we feel are relevant to this that we want to toss on this board to get wider attention, and maybe they'll become relevant at that time. But if we're not using them now, we may as well get rid of them.
Okay, so and we just got started, so maybe we just keep them for now and see how we use them.
Yeah.
Just wasn't sure about your workflow.
I think in review is almost always only useful for large changes that you're going to review over time. Since most of these are like small config tweaks, I don't think it's going to map well. And approved is definitely not helping us.
But not right now. What Aaron's saying is in the future they might. So we could keep them for a while. All right, so let's just wait and see what happens there. And
Okay.
then the monitoring column is something Rob suggested. So my question there is just, that's like our parking lot to see how the jobs are performing. So what might be the timeline for taking action to move those to the next step? What do you need to do and find out? How much longer do you need to monitor?
I feel like we've probably had sufficient time. I mean, so these are sort of questions I maybe have for the broader group. We still haven't actually defined metrics that are measurable that say success, yes or no. I have some things linked in the doc that I could make as suggestions, but my general sense is like, if we make the changes and the CI signal folks feel like, yeah, everything's about as stable as it has been, maybe even more so, I think that is the definition of done there. Like, as long as we haven't made things worse, that seems like good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like part of the point of introducing these resource limits and requests is that when, we do experience flakes or failures, that we're able to pinpoint why they're happening. So, theoretically, as the tests that are running as part of these jobs change over time, the limits and requests could need to change as well. So yeah, as far as like actually adding these, I think we are done. And monitoring, like in the broad sense, is just going to continue to happen over time. That's kind of like the purview of CI signals responsibilities.
Okay, so we have the work itself and then we have the metrics. So for what's in the monitoring column, what's your next step?
I would feel like basically calling these done.
Okay.
And I'm okay if the people who are currently assigned to these issues go through and say like, yeah, I've been watching it for a couple of days and it looks okay. I had planned on sweeping through these at some point myself, but my schedule's been pretty booked. But if people are waiting for some kind of signal to say, should we call these done now? I think we've reached that point.
Okay, so maybe some of them are already here and they can signal interest now, like you can just say like close mine. And if they're not here, we can follow up on Slack.
Yeah, we can always, I think we can work through the list, start closing them off. And if, you know, at the end of the day, if anything needed to be reopened off the back of this change, they could be reopened. The intention there was just to, just to shorten the in progress column.
Yep.
Just to show that this, yeah, just to show that the work had been done and that they were just keeping an eye on it. But like everyone says, I think we can close these off now.
Okay, so do you want to handle that? And do you need help
I'm happy
handling it?
I'll be happy to work through that list and close them off.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Yeah, and to Rob's point, it is great because then you can see what still actually needs work to be done and what's just parking. So it just helps create visibility because otherwise there'd be 22 items in progress and that's a lot harder to kind of go through than 12. Yeah, well,
yeah.
What ends up happening is that work just kind of gets hidden and kind of can stall because you're just looking at too much at one time. So in terms of what's in progress then, is it moving forward and how do we know?
My impression is many of the make critical jobs guarantee pod quality of service can probably be moved over to the monitoring column. As far as I'm aware, almost every single one of these has had a pull request merged. So it may just be a matter of like clicking through and seeing if the pull request has been merged associated with it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, seems like it. So I'll move this one over, but I think people who are assigned to these issues can totally move it over. Or Lori, if you want to sort of groom the board that way, that could also be helpful.
Okay, because I looked at that one, for example, and Tim is out of office at the moment. So I wasn't sure if there was anything more to do, and I'm not going to bother him. It's a personal matter. So I think he's on a few other items in here. I'm not sure because.
Sure, I would probably suggest other members of the CI signal team can probably keep track of this on his behalf.
Yeah, I think that would be great unless somebody wants to just brief me on what to look for, because.
Yeah, I think like if they have a PR merge, then we move them to monitoring. But there are some that you know, someone has opened a PR and we haven't reviewed it yet, and most of them are moving. A few are stalled on review or the author being out, as you mentioned. I know I have a few stalled just because I've mostly been like load shedding review and didn't sorting that out and didn't actually get many reviews done for a couple days.
I think just having Rob, because he's working on this stuff right now, like if Rob is willing to just look at the in progress column and keep that kind of clean, like moving things to monitoring that should be moved, if he's okay with that, I think we probably got the job done.
Yeah, I'm happy to go through both those lists on that. Yeah. So this is specifically for the resource changes to the configuration.
I think it was a critical jobs, right? So anything with critical jobs.
Yeah. The QoS. Yeah, cool. That's fine. Yeah.
So. All right. And then, cool. And then in terms of the metrics, Aaron, what's your plan? What would you like to be your next step for getting those?
Let me just kind of walk through some of the rest of the stuff in the doc, and we'll see where that takes us. So this is the umbrella issue that resulted from our discussions 2 weeks ago, which tries to represent sort of what we feel like are the 3 most critical pieces of action that need to be taken in order to mitigate the situation. Then we need to figure out how to define like what success looks like and what our metrics is. I've had a difficult time creating issues to represent these because I can't describe like, this is the metric you should go measure and implement. It's more like we need to go do a bunch of discovery and there might be a lot of false starts. That's at least what I've been encountering personally. And then these were sort of the 3 other like lower priority things that we discussed doing afterwards. So things like mandating that every single proud job has contact info, and then removing like perma-failing jobs, starting with the really egregious ones and then figuring out based on our experience there, how to create a policy to sort of continue doing that going forward. So let's see, back to the doc. So as far as where we're at with our existing, migrating existing jobs, this is a spreadsheet that should be accessible to Kubernetes Dev and Kubernetes SIG Testing members. It's generated by a little report thing that I have. It's very manual. I kind of just threw it together and present to the group here. And I'm filtering on every job that's in the SIG release blocking dashboard and also has pod QoS guaranteed true. I'm picking up a couple things that also happen to have word blocking in them, but aren't guaranteed just because like SIG release prototype master doesn't seem like an appropriate dashboard nor rel-eng blocking. But this is just a sign that yes, I think we have, this would be my metric to measure like, have we done the things we said we would do? Yes, we have. It would take me a little bit more clicking around to do this for merge blocking. Let's see if I can do that real fast. But the intent is, this is sort of more of a maybe reporting mechanism that we could use to figure out what our work is. And then there are tests that basically enforce this stuff. The tests are informative and then flips to blocking. Let's see. Here, and then Kubernetes. There. I don't even know why those are there. Ostensibly, these should be all of the pre-submits that run against the Kubernetes repo and are also merge blocking. And by merge blocking, I mean they either always run and are considered blocking, or they run if certain files change and are blocking. So again, not sure why kubeflow is showing up here, but the gist is, I think there are some kind jobs that we need to set resource limits for, and then hopefully we'll be done with merge blocking. Let's see. So we talked about the idea that when we were experiencing pain in the beginning, early July, we experienced this by pods getting either scheduling timeouts or failing to schedule entirely due to resource problems. Pods that had this, jobs or pods that had this happen were jobs that ended up going into the error state. So I'm looking at the Prow dashboard. This shows all jobs for all repos, not just the ones for Kubernetes. So if I filter down on the number of errors over the last 7 days, I'll back this up just to like the last 90 days. I went through and bumped the persistence on the Prometheus instance that this queries against, so that we'll be able to sort of see things going forward. The persistence was tuned to like 4 weeks. So we could take a number of jobs in an error state as some kind of signal that like something bad is happening, and we could take the reduction of this number down to 0 as a signal that we think we've stopped the badness. And this corresponds roughly to when we were experiencing a lot of pain. And this corresponds roughly to, I don't know if we have not been experiencing a lot of pain. But you can also see this roughly corresponds to like the volume of pre-submit jobs has also lessened over time. So it could be that when we, turn things back on and PR volume increases, maybe we'll start seeing errors go up again as well. Beyond that, I feel like people have experienced like jobs flaking on them, and I don't know how to sufficiently represent that in a dashboard, or be able to directly tie jobs flaking to like resource issues. I wasn't sure if just Daniel or Rob, either of you sort of have a pulse check on the general stability of the jobs lately. How do you check that? What do you
Yeah,
go
so there's not a lot of stuff exposed in Spyglass about, why something failed. In fact, until recently, it would say a job failed even if it errored out. So there's like a pod scheduling timeout or something like that. That's been updated. One of the things that makes it hard to understand what's happening is that if a job has any sort of error, so pod scheduling timeout or anything of that nature, we don't get any of the podinfo.json, so that's not being published. So it's pretty much impossible to get anything other than there's a pod scheduling timeout, so you don't know, kind of like the underlying reason for that. I'm working on adding some of that to it, so hopefully when folks see, that especially on PRs, that something happened, that they can go and it'll kind of like hit them in the face, whether it was, a resource issue or there's something actually wrong with the change that they're submitting. So hopefully that will help to some extent.
Okay.
Do you want to? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
I was just gonna suggest that maybe some of you want to get together and just sort of hammer out the metrics that you think are worth taking a look at or formalizing into like how we're doing, and maybe also you'd mentioned that there's some discovery involved. So maybe like what is there to discover? Like what it would be the checklist for things to look into, and then maybe from that checklist we could break down the work a bit. It could even be items that we put in the project board in case there's things that we would want people to take a look at, to come back with findings, like, go look at what's happening here and then come back and let us know.
I'm happy to give that a shot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'd
like
agree. Yeah, it's a good idea.
I can make an umbrella issue, but go off and explore, and I can make issues for it. These are ideas I have. What I don't feel like I can accurately do is, and here's how to know when you've gone too far off the beaten path, and this is worth, and this is not worth it. I don't really, so I'm gonna have to ask that people sort of use their best judgment there.
Maybe also time box it, like spend 4 hours or something total looking at this thing. But I think if you set up the structure, like what to look at in terms of like, start here and these are the things you might look out for, then that's kind of declarative. So, and it gives people latitude to learn what are relevant metrics in this environment that can help them become more acquainted with that.
I just want to caution, I think a successful in state where we've actually gotten everything happy is relatively easy to measure and won't need much time to define, but trying to define how individual things are working well, it's going to be difficult. There's a lot of things that are hard to control for, like the load on CI, like as 120 development opens up, for example, or like, I don't know, is a job consuming more than it needs, or
okay, so you might have to curate your list.
Yeah, I think we can define what does it look like when we've reached a healthy state and things run well pretty easily. I tossed out a metric around this previously that I think is good enough, just around the amount of error state jobs we have. I think we could lose a lot of time trying to define more granular metrics and probably not get super far with it.
Okay.
But it might be useful to look at trying to find the right trade-off and bin packing tightly and how we make that maintainable long term, as in only requesting what we actually need.
Yeah, some of that can be kind of difficult without SIG involvement from like, you have to understand exactly what a test is doing to understand whether it's consuming more than it should or the resource limits and requests are where they should be at. Like, for instance, I know that a few of us have been looking at the verify test that was using wildly more memory than it needed. And, previously the response to that was to, bump the memory request higher, right? Oh, it needs more memory. Let's do that. Actually investigating whether it should need that much memory is a different thing entirely. So I don't want to, like, as we're kind of shifting more responsibility or motivation to SIG owners, I don't want to like also throw this in there because that's a fairly significant ask. But in the long term, I think it would be a reasonable and more sustainable path to have SIG owners be responsible for the amount of resources the tests that they run consume. I mean, that seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do, although it is a bit far from where we're at right now, I'd say.
Okay, so there's two different approaches here. Maybe you can combine them. So there's the discovery of things side, and then there's also, we know what we have to measure. So maybe the four of you would just want to hammer out what you want to do with metrics. Would that be possible? Like in a Google Doc or on Slack, just what's your approach here?
I will
tricky.
see what I can manage with my schedule.
Would you agree that it's tricky? You see, on the face of it, on the face of it, when we stand in front of test grid, we know where we're at. You know, in terms of green and red, and what you're asking for is something that I think that we might have to spend a few hours having a little think. Can we create some definitions? Can we create meaningful and useful metrics? And then we'll have to have a little think about, like Ben said, well, where's the trade-off here? How much effort will we put in here to, and what will be the reward? I'm in
so the idea is not to do this now. Sorry, don't want to interrupt, but it's not to do this now. You go off and do the thing.
We're naturally trying to figure it out now, and you need to stop us from doing that.
But it sounds like it requires some time, and like you're saying, it requires a think. So I don't know if with 4 minutes left, if you have enough time to do that.
So my suggestion was going to be, I feel as though the forcing function for us will be moving on the next two tasks. So one is migrating the remainder of the release blocking jobs to a publicly visible cluster in K8s infra. This one here. I really wish I could shard this out to the community members so they could help do this for me. But unfortunately, most of this involves Google.com specific stuff. So I've been working on chipping away at the things that I can. I feel like all that really remains is deciding what to do with the release, like the build related release jobs. And we need to figure out how we want to set aside or reserve resources for those jobs while they continue to run behind the walls of Google.com. Again, I kind of feel like that's something community members can't really actively participate in. But you know, there we are with that. I'm also just sort of trying to get prototype equivalents to these jobs running in community visible infrastructure so the community can see what kind of resources are applied. The bigger lift is going to be moving over all of the merge blocking jobs or all of the pre-submits. There is at least an order of magnitude, if not 2 orders of magnitude, more traffic and resource consumption by these pre-submits than there is by the release blocking jobs. So we're really going to start stressing or exercising whatever capacity related issues we might have with the K8s infra clusters. I have been trying to go through in anticipation of this and start issuing requests for more quota in terms of CPUs and available IP addresses and things like that. I've been trying to pre-allocate more projects to set up for Boscus. So you can see here, the number of GCE projects has now increased to like 120 something in the last week. And this is to anticipate, if I look at the number of GCE projects that are used by, that they're using the Google.com build cluster, it hovers somewhere under 100 and occasionally peaks around the 100 mark. And so given what we already have as our load, trying to anticipate we may need that many. And just also making sure we have equivalents for special projects like GPU stuff, or scalability related stuff. This is also just really going to exercise the visibility that community members have into the cluster infrastructure and the metrics that they use to monitor the health of that cluster. So I feel like this will give more priority and maybe more visibility to the idea of how are we going to measure metrics that show success and health. Because I feel like attempting to do too much of that with all of these jobs sitting in a place that's not as visible to the community is not quite as fruitful. So it's my intention to start teeing up individual tasks to migrate all of these over and tag them as help wanted. And I could really use help from Rob and Daniel and whoever else has been involved so far in sort of describing what kind of process we would go through to verify that like the jobs look good. And it may be like, could be a little herky-jerky. For all I know, I may be wildly underestimating capacity and we'll have to like stop until we get more quota. But working on this will give us significantly more insight into whether the resource limits that we have set are working appropriately. And then I think because we start seeing the amount of money all of this costs, that can start to move us closer to the world where we talk about individual SIGs getting budgets and how much, where they want to allocate their budget toward. And we may be able to find metrics in the community, may be able to find metrics that sort of show how certain jobs may be over allocating resources. Like it turns out they may be using 20% of the resources that they're asking for the bulk of the time. So my suggestion here would be moving things. Good.
Is this the next policy that you think should be lined up after the current one is done, or?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess we should.
The way we originally discussed this, it was going to be policy number 3. But what I'm trying to say is policy number 2 can't be done by the community.
Mm-hmm. Right. So this is the next community one.
Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the work that I have done to migrate things over for policy number 2, that's given community members sufficient visibility to implement parts of policy number 1. Like they've been able to go, Daniel's been able to go check out the verified job and see like what the metrics look like for memory consumption and stuff. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's time that we give that same level of visibility to the merge blocking jobs.
Do you want to postpone the metrics discussion until some more of this work is done, or do you think that having it now is key?
In terms of me being a blocking factor, I feel like it's more important that I tee all this stuff up. But we're over time for what it's worth. It also just makes me comfortable as a data-driven individual that I don't have data that shows that what we are doing is actually having an effect.
Okay.
I can kind of see in some ways that it is having a effect. Like I can see auto scaling working now based on the resource limits we've set for release blocking jobs, but I cannot verifiably point to a graph that is the smoking gun for the pain that we were experiencing before and point to a similar graph now and show how it is significantly better as a result of what we've done. And that would be the holy grail, right?
Okay. So would Ben's suggestion give you what you're looking for, or do you need to discuss in a group?
I think we need more group discussion.
Okay, so maybe you pull that together as you see fit.
So I'll try to at least start an umbrella issue for that discussion, and we're at time. Anybody have anything else? Okay. Thank you everybody for your time. Appreciate you all showing up, and have a happy Tuesday.